Let's journey back to the end of the 19th century, to a city awakening on the Mediterranean coast. Barcelona, a place of industry and dreams, where the sea breeze carries stories from distant lands. It was in this atmosphere that a young Swiss man arrived. His name was Johan Cruyff, though he was born Hans Gamper in Winterthur, Switzerland, on November 22, 1877. Like many Europeans of his time, he was drawn to Barcelona's growing cosmopolitan energy, arriving in the city in 1898 when he was just 21 years old. Gamper brought with him something precious, a love for football. This sport, still new and exotic in Spain, had captured his heart in Switzerland. But when he arrived in Barcelona, he found no organized club to join, no team to call his own. The city had seen occasional football matches, informal games played by British sailors and workers at the port, but nothing permanent, nothing that belonged to Barcelona itself. For a year, Gamper settled into his new life, working and observing. But the longing to play the beautiful game never left him. And so, on October 22, 1899, he placed an advertisement in a local magazine called Los Deportes. Written in both Spanish and English, it read simply, "Our friend and partner, Mr. Hans Gamper, former Swiss champion, wishes to organize football matches in Barcelona. Those interested should come forward." The response was immediate. On November 29, 1899, in the Gimnasio Sol on Calle de la Merce, a group gathered. There were 11 men in that room, representing different corners of Europe. Swiss, English, Spanish, and German. Together, they founded Football Club Barcelona. Johan Gamper became not just a founder, but the club's first captain, and even scored the club's very first official goal. But a football club needs more than players. It needs an identity, colors that supporters can rally behind. The founders chose deep blue and crimson red stripes for their shirts, colors that some say were inspired by Gamper's former club in Switzerland, FC Barcelona. Others believe they represented something entirely new, a fusion of cultures in this Mediterranean city. These colors, known as blaugrana, would become sacred to generations of Catalans. In those early years, Barcelona played on whatever patch of ground they could find. Their first home was a modest velodrome, a cycling track where football was the secondary attraction. But the club grew quickly. By 1900, just months after their founding, they had already won their first trophy, the Copa Masia, defeating a team of British residents. It was a small tournament, informal by today's standards, but it announced Barcelona's arrival. The club's early success attracted attention, and membership began to grow. What started as 11 men in a gymnasium became dozens, then hundreds. By 1901, Barcelona had moved to a new ground, the Carrer de Muntanya, a simple field but one they could call their own. The stands were wooden benches, the facilities basic, but it was theirs, and the supporters came, curious about this new sport, this new passion. Johan Gamper's influence extended beyond those founding days. He would serve as club president 5 different times between 1908 and 1925, each time rescuing Barcelona from financial difficulties or organizational chaos. He was the club's North Star in those uncertain years, always bringing it back to its founding principles: sport, community, and something more, a sense of Catalan identity that was beginning to attach itself to the blue and red stripes. As the 20th century's first decade unfolded, Barcelona established itself not just as a football club, but as something woven into the fabric of the city itself. By 1910, they had moved again, this time to the Carrer de la Industria, a ground with a capacity of 6,000 spectators. The crowds were growing, the passion deepening, and Barcelona was no longer just a team, it was becoming a symbol, a gathering place, a source of pride for a city that was finding its modern voice. As Barcelona entered the 1910s, the club began to taste success on a grander scale. The year 1910 brought something truly special. Barcelona won their first Copa del Rey, Spain's premier football competition. They defeated Club Español de Madrid in the final, and Joan Gamper himself, the founder who had placed that fateful advertisement 11 years earlier, lifted the trophy high. It was a moment that announced Barcelona as more than just a regional team playing on borrowed fields. They were national champions. But football in those early days was still finding its shape and rhythm. Matches were fewer, seasons shorter, and clubs relied entirely on their members and local support to survive. There were no wealthy benefactors, no television money, no commercial deals. Barcelona continued to grow organically, rooted deeply in the community it served. By 1919, just 20 years after its founding, the club had over 5,000 members, an extraordinary number for the time. These weren't just spectators buying tickets to watch a show, they were owners, participants in something they felt truly belonged to them. The need for a larger home became increasingly urgent as crowds swelled. The wooden stands at Carrer de la Industria could no longer contain the passion. And so, in 1922, Barcelona unveiled a new stadium that would define an entire era, Les Corts. Named after the neighborhood where it stood in western Barcelona, this ground could hold 20,000 supporters initially, though it would be expanded several times in the years to come as the club's popularity soared. It was here, in this stadium with its steep stands and intimate atmosphere, that Barcelona would build its legend through the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. The atmosphere at Les Corts was electric, with fans close enough to the pitch to feel part of every moment, every goal, every triumph. During these formative years, something else was happening quietly but profoundly. Barcelona was becoming more than a sports club. Spain in the 1920s was politically turbulent, and Catalonia had long sought to preserve its distinct language, culture, and identity within the Spanish state. When the dictatorship of Miguel Primo de Rivera came to power in 1923, Catalan symbols and language faced systematic suppression. Football stadiums became one of the few places where Catalans could gather in large numbers and express themselves freely. Barcelona's motto, adopted in these years, captured this sentiment perfectly: Més que un club, more than a club. These three Catalan words would echo through generations, becoming sacred to supporters. Barcelona wasn't just about football, about winning trophies or entertaining crowds. It was about belonging, about cultural pride, about quiet resistance in the face of oppression. When fans filled Les Corts, they weren't just watching a match, they were participating in an act of Catalan identity, a defiant celebration of who they were. The 1920s brought sporting glory too. Between 1920 and 1928, Barcelona would win the Copa del Rey 5 times, establishing themselves as the dominant force in Spanish football. Their style was beginning to take shape, technical, possession-based, influenced by the diverse European origins of their early players and coaches. This wasn't the physical, direct football favored by other clubs. Barcelona was developing something more graceful, more artistic. Among the stars of this golden era was Josep Samitier, a name still whispered with reverence by those who know their history. Samitier joined Barcelona in 1919 and became their first true icon, the first player whose name transcended the club itself. His elegant style, his ability to control the ball with extraordinary grace, and his remarkable eye for goal made him the symbol of Barcelona's dominance in the 1920s. He would score over 300 goals for the club and lift trophy after trophy, his name sung from the terraces of Les Corts. But tragedy touched Joan Gamper's life in ways that would forever shape the club's mythology. Despite all his success with Barcelona, despite being the man who had saved the club from extinction multiple times, Gamper faced devastating personal struggles and financial ruin during the Great Depression. On July 30, 1930, at the age of 52, he took his own life. The news devastated Barcelona and the entire city. Thousands attended his funeral, mourning not just a man but the embodiment of everything their beloved club represented. Even today, his legacy is honored and remembered. The club's training ground bears his name, and his story is told to every generation of Barcelona supporters as a reminder of where it all began. The club pressed on, carrying Gamper's vision forward into a new decade. In 1928, Spain launched La Liga, the first truly national football league that would bring together the country's best teams in organized competition. Barcelona was a founding member, one of 10 clubs that would compete in that historic inaugural season. Though they didn't win that first title, Athletic Bilbao claimed the honor. Barcelona finished as runners-up, a sign of the glory that would come. The 1930s would test Barcelona in ways the founders could never have imagined. The decade began with triumph. In 1929, Barcelona won their first La Liga title, the championship that had eluded them in the inaugural season. It was a moment of validation, proof that Barcelona could compete and win at the highest level of Spanish football. The streets of Barcelona celebrated, and Les Courts erupted with joy. But darker clouds were gathering over Spain. The political situation grew increasingly unstable, and by 1936, the country descended into civil war. The Spanish Civil War would tear the nation apart for 3 brutal years, and Barcelona, as a republican stronghold and the heart of Catalan identity, found itself at the center of the conflict. Football became secondary to survival. During the war, Les Courts Stadium was bombed. The stands that had witnessed so much glory were damaged, a stark reminder that no place was safe. Many players left, fleeing the violence or joining the fighting. The club struggled to field teams, struggled to maintain any sense of normalcy. Yet somehow, incredibly, Barcelona continued to play matches when they could, offering brief moments of escape from the horrors surrounding them. When the war ended in 1939, Francisco Franco's nationalist forces had won. Franco's dictatorship would rule Spain for the next 36 years, and his regime viewed Catalan identity with deep suspicion and hostility. The Catalan language was banned in public, Catalan symbols were prohibited, and institutions associated with Catalonia faced persecution. Barcelona, the football club that had become synonymous with Catalan pride, was in grave danger. The regime forced Barcelona to remove the Catalan flag from their crest and insisted the club's name be changed from the Catalan Football Club Barcelona to the Castilian Club de Futbol Barcelona. Even more devastating, the club's president, Josep Sunyol, had been executed by nationalist forces in 1936. He remains the only football club president in history to be killed for his political beliefs. His memory would be honored decades later, but during Franco's rule, his name could not even be spoken. Despite this oppression, or perhaps because of it, Barcelona's role as more than a club only deepened. The stadium became one of the few places where Catalans could gather in large numbers and speak their language quietly among friends. Every match was an act of cultural resistance, every goal a small victory against erasure. The regime understood this and kept Barcelona under constant surveillance. In 1943, something occurred that would become legendary in Barcelona's history, though shrouded in controversy and myth. Barcelona faced Real Madrid in the Copa del Rey semifinal. After winning the first leg 3-0 in Barcelona, they traveled to Madrid for the return match. Before the game, the Director of State Security visited Barcelona's dressing room, reminding them of the regime's generosity in allowing them to exist. The implied threat was clear. Barcelona lost that match 11-1, the most humiliating defeat in the club's history. Whether intimidation caused the loss or if it was simply a catastrophic performance remains debated, but the story became part of Barcelona's identity, a reminder of what they endured. Yet Barcelona survived these dark years and even found moments of sporting success. In 1945, they won La Liga again, and in 1948 and 1949, they secured back-to-back league titles. The great Laszlo Kubola arrived in 1950, a Hungarian refugee who couldn't even play for Spain's national team but became a symbol of Barcelona's internationalism and refuge for those fleeing oppression. Kubala's extraordinary talent drew massive crowds. In 1952, an exhibition match he played in attracted over 60,000 spectators, far exceeding Les Court's official capacity. The message was clear: Barcelona needed a bigger home. The 1950s would bring Barcelona into a new era, one defined by a structure that would become sacred to millions. The club had outgrown Les Courts, that intimate stadium where so much history had unfolded. The crowds were too large, the ambitions too grand for those aging stands. Barcelona needed something monumental, something that reflected their place not just in Catalonia, but in world football. And so, on September 24, 1957, Camp Nou opened its gates for the first time. The name itself means new field in Catalan, simple yet perfect. The stadium was enormous by the standards of the time, with an initial capacity of 93,000 spectators. It was the largest stadium in Spain and one of the largest in all of Europe. The opening match saw Barcelona defeat a representative team from Warsaw, and as fans streamed into this vast concrete bowl, they understood they were witnessing the birth of something extraordinary. Camp Nou wasn't just large, it was designed with vision. The steep stands brought fans close to the action despite the stadium's size. The architecture was modernist, clean lines and functional beauty that reflected Barcelona's identity as a progressive, cosmopolitan city. This wasn't merely a football ground. It was a cathedral for the religion of football, a gathering place for a community that had been denied so many other forms of expression. The stadium would grow over the decades, expanded multiple times until it could hold over 99,000 people, making it the largest stadium in Europe. But even in those early years, Camp Nou represented something profound. Under Franco's dictatorship, where Catalan culture was suppressed, this stadium became a sanctuary. Here, surrounded by thousands of fellow Catalans, people could chant in their language, wave their colors, and feel a sense of belonging that was denied elsewhere. The 1950s also brought Barcelona success on the pitch to match their new home. Between 1951 and 1953, Barcelona won La Liga 3 consecutive times, a period of dominance that announced them as Spain's premier club. Laszlo Kubala was at the heart of this success, his skill and charisma captivating everyone who watched him play. He scored goals that seemed impossible, created moments of magic that made people believe in something beyond the everyday struggles of life under dictatorship. In 1958 and 1959, Barcelona claimed back-to-back La Liga titles again, making it 5 championships in the decade. They also won the Copa del Rey multiple times, but more significantly, they began to look beyond Spain's borders. European competition was still in its infancy, but Barcelona participated in the early editions of what would become the European Cup and the Intercities Fairs Cup, a precursor to the UEFA Cup. In 1958, Barcelona won the Intercities Fairs Cup, defeating London 11 over 2 legs. It was Barcelona's first major European trophy, a statement that they belonged among Europe's elite. The competition may not have had the prestige it would later gain, but for Barcelona, it was crucial. It proved they could compete internationally, that Camp Nou could host the great clubs of Europe, and that Barcelona's style of football resonated beyond Catalonia's borders. The late 1950s also saw Barcelona establish their famous youth academy, known as La Masia. Originally a farmhouse on the grounds near Camp Nou, La Masia would become a factory for talent, a place where young players were taught not just football skills but the Barcelona philosophy. The values instilled there: technical excellence, possession football, humility, and respect for the club's identity, would shape generations of players. Though it would take decades for La Masia to produce its greatest fruits, the seeds were planted in this era. As the 1950s closed, Barcelona stood transformed. They had a stadium that inspired awe, a team that won trophies, and a growing sense that they were building something lasting. The decade had taken them from the intimacy of Les Courts to the grandeur of Camp Nou, from domestic success to European recognition. Yet the political situation in Spain remained oppressive, and Barcelona's identity as more than a club, as a symbol of Catalan resistance and pride, only grew stronger in response. The 1960s dawned with Barcelona hungry for more. They had conquered Spain repeatedly, they had their magnificent stadium, but the ultimate prize, the European Cup, the tournament that crowned the true champions of the continent, remained elusive. Real Madrid had dominated this competition in its early years, winning the first 5 editions, and their success cast a long shadow over Spanish football. Barcelona's chance came in the 1960-61 season. They progressed through the European Cup with determination, defeating opponents and building belief with each round. The final was held at the Wankdorf Stadium in Bern, Switzerland, and their opponents were Benfica of Portugal, a rising force led by the legendary Eusebio. The match was tense, closely fought, and ultimately heartbreaking. Benfica won 3-2, and Barcelona's dream of European glory slipped through their fingers. The disappointment echoed through Camp Nou, but the journey had shown they belonged at this level. Despite that setback, Barcelona continued to collect silverware domestically. In 1960, they won both La Liga and the Copa del Rey, a double that demonstrated their dominance in Spain. The team was evolving, with new stars emerging to carry the torch. Luis Suarez, a Spanish midfielder with extraordinary vision and technical ability, became the first Spanish player to win the Ballon d'Or in 1960. Though he would leave for Inter Milan shortly after, his recognition brought prestige to Barcelona and Spanish football as a whole. The early 1960s also saw Barcelona win more Intercities Fairs Cups, claiming the trophy in 1960 and again in 1966. These victories, while not carrying the weight of the European Cup, proved Barcelona's consistency in European competition. They were learning how to navigate continental tournaments, understanding the different tactical approaches of teams from across Europe, and building a reputation as a club that played beautiful, attacking football. In 1966, Barcelona achieved another domestic double, winning La Liga and the Copa del Rey. But perhaps more significant than the trophies was the appointment of a new coach that same year. Rinus Michels, a Dutch visionary who would transform football itself. Michels arrived with radical ideas about how the game should be played, concepts that would eventually be known as total football. His philosophy emphasized fluidity, with players interchanging positions, pressing high up the pitch, and maintaining constant possession. Though Michels' first spell at Barcelona was relatively brief, lasting until 1968, he planted seeds that would flourish decades later. He demanded technical excellence and tactical intelligence from his players. He wanted Barcelona to control matches through possession, to dominate the ball so completely that opponents could barely touch it. These ideas weren't immediately successful. Barcelona didn't win major trophies during his initial tenure, but they were revolutionary, and they aligned perfectly with Barcelona's identity and aspirations. The late 1960s were quieter in terms of silverware, a period of transition and experimentation. Barcelona won the Copa del Rey in 1968, but La Liga proved elusive. Yet the club was evolving, modernizing, and preparing for what would come next. The youth system continued to develop, Camp Nou remained packed with devoted supporters, and Barcelona's place as a symbol of Catalan identity never wavered, even as Franco's regime continued its oppression. In 1968, Barcelona won the Intercities Fairs Cup again, their third victory in this competition. It was a fitting end to a decade that had brought both triumph and disappointment, progress and frustration. The 1960s had shown Barcelona could compete with anyone, that their style of football resonated across Europe, and that their supporters would fill Camp Nou regardless of results, because being at the stadium was about more than just watching a match. It was about being part of something larger, something that connected them to their culture, their community, and their sense of self in a country that tried to deny them these very things. As the 1970s began, Barcelona entered a new chapter, one that would be defined by a single name that still echoes through the halls of Camp Nou: Johan Cruyff. In 1973, Barcelona signed the Dutch maestro from Ajax Amsterdam for a world record transfer fee. Cruyff was more than just a footballer. He was an artist, a philosopher of the game, the embodiment of everything Rinus Michels had taught and more. Cruyff's arrival electrified Barcelona. Here was a player who thought about football differently, who saw passes others couldn't imagine, who moved with a grace that seemed almost otherworldly. In his very first season, 1973-74, Cruyff led Barcelona to La Liga glory, ending a 14-year drought without a league title. The championship was celebrated wildly across Catalonia, not just because of the trophy itself, but because of how it was won, with style, with beauty, with football that made people dream. That same season brought an even more significant moment. Barcelona traveled to the Santiago Bernabéu, the home of their greatest rivals, Real Madrid. Real Madrid represented everything Barcelona opposed: centralist power, Franco's preferred club, the establishment. The match on February 17, 1974, became legendary. Barcelona won 5-0, destroying Real Madrid in their own stadium with Cruyff orchestrating every moment. It wasn't just a victory, it was a statement, a humiliation of the regime's symbolic team. Catalans still speak of that match with reverence. Cruyff's impact extended beyond the pitch. He brought with him the Dutch philosophy of total football, the ideas Michels had introduced but which Cruyff perfected. He demanded his teammates think, move, and play intelligently. He insisted on possession, on control, on dominating matches through technical superiority. These principles would become Barcelona's DNA, encoded into the club's identity for generations to come. In 1975, Francisco Franco died, ending 36 years of dictatorship. Spain began its transition to democracy, and Catalonia slowly regained its voice. The Catalan language returned to public life, symbols of Catalan identity could be displayed openly, and Barcelona Football Club could fully embrace what it had always been, the beating heart of Catalan culture. In 1974, the club officially restored the Catalan flag to their crest, a simple but profoundly emotional act. The late 1970s brought continued success. Barcelona won La Liga again in 1985, though the years between were marked by near misses and frustration. They won the Copa del Rey in 1978 and 1981, and in 1979, they captured the European Cup Winners' Cup, defeating Fortuna Düsseldorf 4-3 in an exhilarating final in Basel. It was Barcelona's first truly major European trophy, carrying more prestige than the Intercities Fairs Cup, and it proved they could triumph on the biggest stages. The 1980s saw Barcelona become even more international in their outlook. Diego Maradona, the Argentine genius, arrived in 1982 for another world record fee. Though his time at Barcelona was turbulent and brief, lasting only 2 seasons, Maradona's presence added to the club's growing reputation as a destination for the world's greatest talents. He won the Copa del Rey in 1983, but injuries and controversies limited his impact. Still, his legacy was watching one of football's true geniuses wear the blaugrana, even if only briefly. Gary Lineker, the English striker, joined in 1986 and brought a different kind of excellence, clinical finishing and professionalism. He scored prolifically, helping Barcelona capture the Copa del Rey in 1988. But more importantly, Barcelona was building towards something greater. In 1988, Johan Cruyff returned, this time as coach. The student of Michels, the man who had brought glory as a player, now had the chance to build something revolutionary as a manager. Cruyff's appointment as coach marked the beginning of Barcelona's most successful era to that point. He inherited a talented squad, but new transformation was needed. He promoted young players from La Masia, trusted in their technical ability, and imposed his philosophy ruthlessly. The football world watched with interest as this legendary figure took control, wondering if his vision could translate from the pitch to the touchline. Johan Cruyff's vision as Barcelona coach began to crystallize in the early 1990s. He assembled a team that would come to be known simply as the Dream Team, a collection of players who embodied his philosophy so completely that they seemed to play with one mind. At the heart of this team were graduates of La Masia. Pep Guardiola, a young midfielder with remarkable vision who became Cruyff's eyes and ears on the pitch, orchestrating play from deep positions with almost telepathic understanding of his coach's desires. In 1991, Barcelona won La Liga, but this was just the beginning. The following season, 1991-92, brought glory that had eluded Barcelona for decades. They won La Liga again, dominating Spanish football with a style that mesmerized fans across the world. But the true prize came on May 20, 1992, at Wembley Stadium in London. Barcelona faced Sampdoria in the European Cup final, the tournament they had dreamed of winning since that heartbreaking loss to Benfica in 1961. The match was tense, tight, and scoreless as it wore into extra time. Then, in the 111th minute, Ronald Koeman, the Dutch defender and free-kick specialist, stepped up to take a shot from outside the box. His strike was perfect, thundering past the goalkeeper and into the net. Barcelona had won the European Cup, the most prestigious trophy in club football. Camp Nou erupted when the team returned home. This wasn't just a trophy, it was validation, proof that Barcelona's philosophy could conquer Europe. The Dream Team continued their dominance. Barcelona won La Liga 4 consecutive times from 1991 to 1994, a period of sustained excellence unprecedented in the club's history. The team played football that seemed almost artistic, intricate passing movements, positional fluidity, relentless pressing, and a hunger to control every match through possession. Opponents often found themselves chasing shadows, unable to touch the ball for long stretches. Among the stars of this era was Hristo Stoichkov, the fiery Bulgarian forward who arrived in 1990. Stoichkov's combination of skill and intensity made him one of Europe's most feared attackers. In 1994, he won the Ballon d'Or after an extraordinary year that saw him lead Bulgaria to the World Cup semi-finals and Barcelona to another La Liga title. His partnership with Brazilian striker Romario created magic, the two understanding each other's movements instinctively. Romario himself deserves special mention. Arriving in 1993, the Brazilian was poetry in motion, a striker whose technical ability and finishing were sublime. He scored goals that defied logic, curling shots into impossible corners, dribbling through entire defenses with ease. Though his time at Barcelona was brief, just 2 seasons, he left an indelible mark, helping secure that 4th consecutive league title in 1994. The Dream Team also featured other remarkable talents. Michael Laudrup, the Danish playmaker, pulled strings in midfield with elegance and creativity. José María Baqueiro provided goals and leadership. Andoni Zubizarreta, the goalkeeper, set records for appearances and brought stability. Each player was exceptional individually, but together, under Cruyff's guidance, they transcended individual brilliance and became something greater. In 1992, Barcelona also won the European Super Cup, defeating Werder Bremen. They added another Copa del Rey to their collection in 1990, though domestic cups seemed almost secondary compared to their league dominance and European triumph. What mattered most was the style, the identity, the sense that Barcelona was showing the world a better way to play football, not through physical dominance or defensive pragmatism, but through skill, intelligence, and beauty. Cruyff's influence extended beyond trophies. He revolutionized La Masia, ensuring the youth academy taught his principles from the youngest ages. Every boy who entered La Masia learned to think like Cruyff thought, to value possession above all else, to understand that football was as much about the mind as the body. The fruits of this work would become apparent in the next generation, though no one could predict just how spectacular that harvest would be. By 1996, Cruyff's time as coach ended, dismissed after a season without major trophies. But his legacy was secure, unshakable. He had given Barcelona their first European Cup, 4 consecutive league titles, and a philosophy that would define the club forever. More than any other figure except perhaps Joan Gamper himself, Johan Cruyff had shaped what Barcelona was and what it would become. The years following Cruyff's departure were turbulent for Barcelona. The late 1990s brought a succession of coaches, each trying to fill the void left by the Dream Team era. In 1997, Bobby Robson, the respected English manager, arrived and brought immediate success. That season, Barcelona won the Copa del Rey, the European Cup Winners' Cup, and the Spanish Super Cup. It was a haul of silverware that would satisfy most clubs, yet somehow it felt incomplete without La Liga, the championship that mattered most in Spain. Robson's assistant during that successful season was a young Portuguese coach named José Mourinho, learning his craft and observing everything. Though neither knew it then, their paths would cross again in very different circumstances. Robson stayed only 1 season before moving upstairs, and Louis van Gaal, another Dutch disciple of the Cruyff philosophy, took over as head coach in 1997. Van Gaal brought structure and discipline that Cruyff's more fluid approach had sometimes lacked. In his first season, 1997-98, Barcelona won the domestic double, La Liga and the Copa del Rey. The following season, they claimed La Liga again, proving that Van Gaal's methods worked. He promoted young players from La Masia, continuing Cruyff's tradition of trusting academy graduates. Among them were Xavi Hernandez and Carles Puyol, 2 teenagers who would become legends. Xavi made his first team debut in 1998, a slight midfielder with extraordinary passing ability and tactical understanding. At first, few could have predicted he would become one of the greatest midfielders in football history, but those who watched him closely saw something special, a player who thought 3 passes ahead, who controlled tempo like a conductor leading an orchestra. Carles Puyol emerged around the same time, a defender with warrior spirit and unwavering commitment to Barcelona. His curly hair would become iconic, his fierce tackles and leadership defining characteristics. Puyol represented everything Barcelona valued: a local boy, a La Masia graduate, someone who understood what wearing the Blaugrana meant on a level that transcended football. The turn of the millennium brought change once again. Van Gaal left in 2000 after tensions with players and management, and Barcelona entered a period of instability. Different coaches came and went. Lorenzo Serra, Carles Rixach, Van Gaal returned briefly for a second spell that proved unsuccessful. The team struggled to recapture the consistency of earlier years, and Real Madrid dominated Spanish football under Florentino Perez's Galacticos policy, signing superstars like Luis Figo, who controversially left Barcelona for their greatest rivals in 2000. Figo's departure stung deeply. He had been Barcelona's talisman, their best player, and his move to Real Madrid felt like betrayal. When he returned to Camp Nou in a Real Madrid shirt, fans showered him with abuse, even throwing a pig's head onto the pitch in one infamous incident. The rivalry between Barcelona and Real Madrid, always intense, reached new levels of animosity. Yet amid these struggles, Barcelona found moments of brilliance. In 2004, they appointed Frank Rijkaard as coach, another Dutchman connected to the Cruyff lineage. Rijkaard brought calm authority and tactical flexibility. More importantly, he had the vision to build around young talent emerging from La Masia, players like Xavi, who was now maturing into a world-class midfielder, and Victor Valdés, a goalkeeper trained in Barcelona's unique style. In 2004, Barcelona made a signing that would change everything. A 17-year-old Argentine named Lionel Messi made his first team debut. Small in stature but immense in talent, Messi had joined Barcelona's youth academy from Argentina at age 13. The club had paid for his medical treatment for growth hormone deficiency, betting on a boy whose ability with a football seemed almost supernatural. Now, that bet was beginning to pay off. Rigid's Barcelona started to find rhythm. In the 2004-2005 season, they won La Liga for the first time in 6 years, ending Real Madrid's dominance. The team played with joy and freedom, blending experienced stars like Ronaldinho, the Brazilian magician who had arrived in 2003, with emerging talents like Messi and the ever-reliable Xavi. Camp Nou was alive again, filled with hope that perhaps another golden era was beginning, that the principles Cruyff had instilled were about to bear fruit once more in ways no one could yet imagine. The mid-2000s belonged to a man whose smile was as famous as his skills. Ronaldinho. The Brazilian had arrived in 2003, and by 2005, he was at the peak of his powers, arguably the best footballer on the planet. Ronaldinho didn't just play football, he celebrated it, performing tricks and flicks that seemed designed purely for joy. When he received the ball, Camp Nou held its breath in anticipation of what magic might come next. In 2005, Ronaldinho won the Ballon d'Or, becoming the first Barcelona player to receive the award since Hristo Stoichkov in 1994. It was recognition of his extraordinary talent and Barcelona's return to prominence. He won it again in 2006, back-to-back awards that placed him among the game's immortals. Watching Ronaldinho was like watching someone who had never forgotten that football was meant to be fun, even at the highest level. The 2005-2006 season brought the triumph Barcelona had craved for 14 years. They won La Liga with authority, but more importantly, they conquered Europe once again. The Champions League final, held at the Stade de France in Paris on May 17, 2006, pitted Barcelona against Arsenal. The match was difficult. Arsenal took the lead and had Barcelona under pressure for long periods. But goals from Samuel Eto'o and a late header from substitute Juliano Belletti secured a 2-1 victory. Barcelona were European champions for the second time. That Barcelona team was a beautiful blend. Ronaldinho provided creativity and flair. Samuel Eto'o, the Cameroonian striker, offered pace and clinical finishing. Xavi controlled the midfield with his metronomic passing. Carles Puyol led the defense with courage. Victor Valdés guarded the goal. And on the bench or playing as a substitute, the teenage Lionel Messi was learning, watching, absorbing everything, preparing for the moment when he would step fully into the spotlight. By 2006-2007, that moment was arriving. Messi, now 19, began to start more regularly. His dribbling ability was mesmerizing, his acceleration explosive, his balance impossible. He glided past defenders as if they weren't there, leaving them grasping at air. The comparisons to Diego Maradona, another small Argentine genius, were inevitable and growing louder. On March 10, 2007, against Getafe in the Copa del Rey, Messi scored a goal that was almost identical to Maradona's famous solo effort against England in the 1986 World Cup, picking up the ball in his own half, dribbling past half the opposing team, and slotting calmly into the net. But as Messi rose, Ronaldinho's star began to fade. The Brazilian's commitment wavered, his fitness declined, and by 2008, he had left Barcelona. His departure marked the end of one era and the beginning of another. Barcelona needed a new direction, a new coach who could harness Messi's burgeoning genius and return the club to the very peak of world football. That coach was Pep Guardiola. Appointed in the summer of 2008, Guardiola was only 37 years old, a former player under Cruyff during the Dream Team era, someone who had absorbed the master's teachings and now had the chance to implement them as a coach. Many doubted whether such a young, inexperienced manager could handle Barcelona, but Guardiola was certain of his vision. He knew exactly what Barcelona should be. Guardiola's first decision was controversial. He told Ronaldinho, Deco, and other stars that they were no longer needed. He promoted young players from Barcelona B, including Pedro Rodriguez and Sergio Busquets, trusting in La Masia graduates just as Cruyff had done. He made Messi the central figure of his team, building everything around the Argentine's unique gifts. He moved Messi from the wing to a more central position, giving him freedom to roam, to find space, to destroy defenses. The results were immediate and spectacular. In Guardiola's first season, 2008-2009, Barcelona achieved something unprecedented. They won the treble, capturing La Liga, the Copa del Rey, and the Champions League in a single season. No Spanish club had ever accomplished this before. The Champions League final, held at the Stadio Olimpico in Rome on May 27, 2009, saw Barcelona defeat Manchester United 2-0. Eto'o scored early, and Messi added a header. The performance was commanding, a display of Barcelona's total superiority. That 2008-2009 team played football that seemed to come from another dimension. They kept the ball for absurd lengths of time, suffocating opponents with possession. Their pressing was relentless. When they lost the ball, they hunted it back in seconds. Xavi and a young Andres Iniesta, another La Masia graduate who had quietly become world-class, controlled midfield with telepathic understanding. Sergio Busquets, just 20 years old, anchored everything with intelligence beyond his years. The style became known as tiki-taka, though Guardiola himself disliked the term. It was possession football taken to its ultimate expression, the purest manifestation of Cruyff's philosophy. And at the center of it all was Messi, scoring goals that defied belief, dribbling through entire teams, creating moments that would be replayed forever. Barcelona weren't just winning, they were redefining what football could be. The success of 2008-2009 was just the beginning. In 2009, Barcelona achieved something even more remarkable. They won an unprecedented 6 trophies in a single calendar year. To the treble, they added the Spanish Super Cup, the UEFA Super Cup, and the FIFA Club World Cup. When they defeated Estudiantes in the Club World Cup final in December 2009, they became the first club ever to win all 6 competitions available to them in one year. It was a mark of absolute dominance. In 2010, Lionel Messi won his first Ballon d'Or, claiming the award that would become almost synonymous with his name. He would win it again in 2011, 2012, and 2015 while at Barcelona, with more to come in later years. Messi wasn't just scoring goals, he was rewriting the record books. His individual brilliance combined with Barcelona's system created something unprecedented in football history. The 2010-11 season brought another Champions League triumph, perhaps the most aesthetically perfect of all. The final at Wembley Stadium on May 28, 2011, saw Barcelona face Manchester United again. This time, the victory was even more emphatic. 3-1, with goals from Pedro, Messi, and David Villa. The performance was so complete, so utterly dominant, that even opposing fans acknowledged they had witnessed something special. This Barcelona team is often considered the greatest club side ever assembled. Guardiola's Barcelona won La Liga in 2009, 2010, and 2011. 3 consecutive titles that matched the Dream Team's achievement. They won the Copa del Rey in 2009 and 2012. But beyond the trophies, they changed how people thought about football. Coaches around the world tried to replicate their style. Young players everywhere practiced the short passes, the quick movements, the constant pressure that Barcelona had perfected. In 2012, Guardiola left Barcelona, exhausted by the intensity and pressure. His replacement was Tito Vilanova, his former assistant, who won La Liga in his only full season, 2012-13, with a record 100 points. but Villanova fell ill with cancer and had to step down. His death in 2014 was mourned throughout the football world, a tragic loss of a talented coach and beloved figure. The post-Guardiola years brought both triumph and turbulence. Luis Enrique took over as coach in 2014 and built a team around a fearsome attacking trio. Messi, Luis Suarez, and Neymar, known collectively as MSN. In 2014-15, this trident led Barcelona to another treble: La Liga, Copa del Rey, and the Champions League. The final in Berlin on June 6, 2015, saw Barcelona defeat Juventus 3-1, with each member of MSN contributing to the victory. Between 2015 and 2019, Barcelona dominated Spanish football domestically, winning La Liga in 2016, 2018, and 2019. They collected Copa del Rey trophies in 2016, 2017, and 2018. Yet European success proved elusive, with painful eliminations despite holding commanding leads. In 2017, they lost a 4-0 first-leg advantage against Paris Saint-Germain, then suffered a humiliating 3-0 defeat to Roma after winning the first leg 4-1 in 2018. In 2019, Liverpool overturned a 3-0 deficit to eliminate them 4-0 at Anfield. These failures, combined with financial mismanagement and internal turmoil, led to a crisis. In 2020, Messi attempted to leave Barcelona, though he ultimately stayed for one more season. In August 2021, despite both parties wanting to continue, Barcelona could not renew Messi's contract due to La Liga's financial regulations. The greatest player in Barcelona's history, perhaps the greatest ever, left for Paris Saint-Germain. It was a devastating moment, marking the end of an era that had defined modern football. The post-Messi years have been challenging but hopeful. Barcelona appointed Xavi Hernandez, their former midfield maestro, as coach in 2021. Despite financial constraints, Xavi led Barcelona to La Liga victory in 2022-23, proving the club could still compete. Young talents like Pedri and Xavi, both La Masia graduates, emerged as stars, carrying forward Barcelona's traditions. In the 2024-25 season, under new coach Hansi Flick, Barcelona have shown renewed promise, with exciting young players blending with experienced figures, suggesting that perhaps another golden era is beginning to form. The story of Barcelona continues, always evolving, always striving, forever more than just a club.